Welcome everybody to Political Science 110 Objective H about political parties, their history and contemporary function. Let's go ahead and begin. First, what are political parties? These are organizations that promote their ideas and their policies by either gaining control or getting people elected to office. The two main political parties in the United States, as you know, are the Republicans and Democrats. Much of today's lecture will discuss those, but we should also keep in mind there are a number of third parties, and they will also feature in today's discussion. What functions do these political parties serve? First, they are a link to politics for voters. They are a way for voters to hold officials in government accountable. So if you are upset with the current president, you may vote against his entire party in the next election to show that you don't like that party's policies or their ideas. They also link people to the government in that voters are able to tell candidates what they believe in order to get the ideas of the people heard in the political debates. Second, political parties unify our fragmented system of government. We have a federal system of government divided up between national and state and local levels. We also have three separate branches of government, so it's all divided up. Parties unify to some extent these different pieces of the government into organizations that can talk to each other. So if you're the Republican governor of Ohio and you want to talk to the Republican senator from New Mexico, that's something that can happen. You have a commonality. So it unifies our government. Lastly, political parties serve as a voice for the opposition. If you are not the political party in power, then your ideas are still heard in a unified, organized way as your political party speaks for your ideas. The party is broken down into an organization of several committees. These committees are seen at the national, state, and local levels. And in the next slide here, right here, you can see the structure of the party system. At the very bottom are party members. These are your registered voters. These are the people that vote in party primaries. This is the biggest group. Above that, you have local party organizations. So, for example, you might have the County Democratic organization or the County Republican organization. There are also specific committees to get people elected at this level. The people at this level are party activists. So these are not just your voters. These are people that show up to put signs in front yards, to make phone calls, to do fundraising. These are people that are the real backbone of a lot of the parties. Above them, you have the state party organizations. This is the state level committees, and these are members elected up to this level from the lower levels. So if you're interested in becoming involved in politics, mostly you start at the local level. Then if you do well there, you're moved up to the state level. Then, of course, at the very top, you have the national party organization. These are the national committees elected by national conventions or sometimes state committees. These are the big-time politicians. These are the people that get a lot of the credit and fame. But as you can see, that national party organization sits at the top of a pyramid, the base of which is made up of a lot of other people doing a lot of other things. And those bottom levels of the pyramid, that's where a lot of the day-to-day functions of the political party come from. The political parties have really two pieces to their organization. They are either the party in the government or the party in the electorate. If they're the party in the government, those are the party members who are presently elected. So the current president is the party in government, the head of the party in government for his or her political party. Their job is governing. So what the party in government does is runs things. They control the government. The rest of the party, these are the party in the electorate. These are the members who identify with the party, they vote for the party. These are your common party members. But the people at the top, they're the party in the government, and they're the ones that actually do the day-to-day running of the government. Here you can see how we have identified with political parties over the past about 50 or so years, 60 years. You can see that the blue line there is Democrats. Democrats are traditionally associated with the color blue. Republicans traditionally associated with the color red. And then the yellow line is independents, people that don't vote with either party. And you can see that over time, the numbers of Democrats, independents, and Republicans have shifted. But in recent years, we're really getting down to being pretty equally broken up between those three groups. And especially what's interesting is the rise of the independent voter. Many more voters now are beginning to say that they don't identify with either political party due to various problems they have with either of the parties, and they are becoming independent. Question. Please answer the following in a complete paragraph. You've just learned about the functions of a political party. Identify these functions, and then predict what kind of barriers parties might face in carrying out these functions. Do you think these are significant or not? Take a few minutes, pause the video, and when you are ready, resume. Now, this brings us to the question of what do the parties stand for? And the parties are essentially instruments for getting ideas put into place. So the parties have ideologies. Republican voters tend to be conservative. Democratic voters tend to be liberal. Now what happens here is that in the Republican primaries, the elections, the primaries, the people that vote there tend to be very conservative for Republicans and very liberal for Democrats. So in a primary election, the candidates are pushed to the extremes. However, in the general election, the election where we actually elect candidates, the more moderate voters turn out. So in the general election, after you get nominated by your party, you have to come back to the center so that you can appeal to as many moderate voters as possible. Now, the parties will list their beliefs in a document known as a platform. Every part of the platform is known as a plank. A plank is a specific policy or ideological objective. So, for example, the Republicans in their platform have a plank that opposes abortion rights, for example. The Democrats have a plank that favors dealing with global climate change. So these are platforms that the parties stand on, and the closer you align with the party platform, the more likely it is you will join that party. Here you see what we were just discussing, the push towards moderation and the pull towards extremism. If you take a few minutes here, you'll see in the top part of this chart, you have liberal on the left, conservative on the right. The blue and red line are the positions for the actual candidates. You can see that that's getting towards the middle, because that's where you have to be. The green line is the electorate. Those are the people that will actually vote for you. To get elected, you obviously have to have a lot of votes, so there is this push towards the middle for both Republicans and Democrats so that they can get those center-of-the-road voters, those middle-of-the-road people who will really help get them elected. However, in a primary, a nominating primary, there's the pull towards the extreme, and that's shown in the bottom half of that chart. Now, if you are not a member of the two major political parties, there are a number of third parties that exist for individuals who are outside of the boundaries of the mainstream two parties. The two largest ones are the Greens on the left and the Libertarians on the right. The Greens tend to be very, very liberal. The Libertarians tend to be very, very conservative. Libertarians are actually so conservative that they favor almost complete freedom from government intervention, where the Green Party is so liberal that they favor essentially a watered-down version of what you would call socialism. So these two parties, the Greens and Libertarians, really fill out much of the rest of the American political spectrum. But we should mention there are so many other third parties that are out there trying to get elected that in your lifetime you may see any number of other groups that are able to take control. Question: are third parties important? Why or why not? And even if a third party doesn't win any elections, what impact can it have? Do take a few moments, please. Consider that, and when you are ready, move on. Now let's take a few minutes here and look into American political party history. We didn't just emerge with our modern-day Democrats and Republicans, but rather this stems from a specific historical development. First, prior to the 1790s, there were no political parties, and many of our earliest founding fathers, most importantly George Washington, said that there should be no political parties, that political parties will tear us apart. But probably much to Washington's dismay, we ignored that advice. And by the time the early 1800s roll around, Alexander Hamilton and John Adams had organized the first political party, the Federalists. James Madison and Thomas Jefferson organized, in response to that, the Republicans. And these were the first two political parties in the United States. The Federalists urged strong federal control of the government. The Republicans urged more state-level control of the government. These two parties were basically only organizations of party and government. They did no election organizing. They weren't trying to get elected. They were more just trying to organize themselves inside the government. That would change as our history develops. By 1830 or so, 1828, Martin Van Buren and Andrew Jackson turned the Democratic Party into the first party that was focused on getting elected. And they did this through the creation of what's called a party machine. A party machine was a tightly organized system at state, city, and county levels that kept control of the voters. So this was especially effective in American cities like Boston, Cleveland, New York, Washington, D.C., places like this, where the party would go and reach out to especially new immigrant communities and give them things, jobs, money, assistance, and in exchange, they would expect that those people would vote for them, and they did. Urban dwellers in the United States in this time tended to be Democrat, just as they are now. The bosses of the parties dominated cities, and they doled out what was called patronage. Patronage was a reward for being faithful. Paying people to vote for you was not unheard of. Giving someone a job in exchange for them working for your party, not unheard of. Patronage, it was how we used to do a lot of things for quite some time until concerns about public corruption really ended the patronage system, and we replaced it with what's called the civil service system, which we have already discussed. The Whigs in the 1830s to 1850s, and later the Republicans, copied the Democrats, and this patronage and corruption led to the party machine being reformed in the early 1900s. One of the most important reforms was the emergence of the party primary. Instead of party bosses choosing candidates to run for an election, there would instead be a primary election, where the members of the party would express their views on who should be the candidate for the party, and then the bosses took a back seat. This also leads to the development of the civil service system as a solution to the problems of patronage and the massive amounts of corruption that were created under that system. So one of the key reforms was this primary movement, where now the average party member would have more to say about who gets nominated and then ultimately elected. Now, we can really break down all of American history into periods of relative stability, where one party tends to be in control for between 25 and 40 years. We call these the party eras. Each era is ended by a critical election. So there's one big moment that really leads to the downfall of one party and the rise of the next. And we usually have some period of realignment or shifting as the parties change in response to these changes. And we have identified 5 party eras in American political history. The first one is the division over states' rights. This leads to the creation of the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans, also known as Jeffersonian Republicans. This was the first division of the very first political parties in the country. It lasted from about 1796 to about 1824. This is the first real political split in the country, was really over who should be in charge, the federal government or the states. Moving forward, leading us up to the build-up to the Civil War, the second era are the Jacksonian Democrats being in control. The Jacksonian Democrats were what was left of the original Democratic Republicans. They were facing down what was left of the Federalists and later known as the Whig Party, parties that don't even exist anymore. But it's the same kind of split here. States' rights versus federal rights. There are civil rights issues that begin to come into play. And this era lasts until 1854, when we enter the third party era, which is definitely the Republican era. This is the ascendancy of the Lincoln Republicans. Now, you have to recall, at this point in history, Republicans were anti-slavery and pro-union. I don't mean labor union. I mean they were pro-keeping the country together. The Democrats were pro-Southern and pro-slavery. So the Republicans dominate, and it's definitely marked by the election of Lincoln, and this lasts for some time. The Democrats line themselves up behind the South, and then after the Civil War, the Democrats are seen as pariahs. And Democrats have a very hard time getting elected anywhere outside of the South. This leads us up until the fourth era. In the fourth era, the Republicans retain control from about 1896 to 1928. In this era, the Democrats are torn apart from the inside by a third party called the People's Party. The People's Party pulls enough votes away from the Democrats that they cannot find a way to really be elected. The Republican policies in this era, however, were not correct policies. Many of the Republican policies from the 1890s to the 1920s led to the Great Depression. Dissatisfaction with the consequences of the Great Depression leads to the end of the Fourth Party era and the ascension of the Democratic Fifth Party era. The Fifth Party era was the era of FDR and the Democrats. And this is the time when the two political parties shift for the most recent time in current history. The Democrats become the party of urban liberals, and the Republicans become the party of Southern conservatives. The Democrats are marked by having a more inclusive party with more African Americans and women. The Republicans hold to conservative values, and the Republicans continue to oppose the expansion of civil rights through most of this time. This ends in 1968 or so and leads to the discussion of a modern Sixth Party era. There's some disagreement over this. It's unclear which party would really be in dominance from the 1960s to now. And this era is unusual. It is hyper-partisan, and there are stark, which means very serious, ideological divides that we didn't always have in previous eras. In previous political eras, the Democrats and Republicans may have disagreed, but they often didn't disagree quite so much. So it's unclear right now how history will judge the current state of political affairs in the United States. Question: Answer the following in a complete paragraph. Go back over the slides that we just kind of did. Trace the development of American political parties in the 20th and 21st centuries. So please don't go all the way back to the beginning, but start in the 20th century and go through the modern day. What has happened? How has it shifted? Take a few moments and do that. You have lots of space on your notes to write at least a complete paragraph, hopefully more. And I hope that you really take some time to get into this question. This is a very important question that has serious consequences for our modern political system. Take a moment, pause the video, answer the question, and I look forward to seeing you in class.